Also, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Gäste, liebe Freunde des Kunstforums Zürich, ich begrüße Sie ganz herzlich zum heutigen Talk, zum Symposium, wie wir das genannt haben, zum Thema Green Deal for Art. Und ich begrüße Sie auch ausdrücklich im Namen unseres Kooperationspartners Löwenbräu Areal hier in Zürich. Wie ich überraschenderweise gesehen habe, wurde so quasi eine Art Forum gebaut für heute Abend. Ich dachte erst, es wäre extra für uns so gemacht, aber es ist, glaube ich, so habe ich es mittlerweile gelernt, für morgen Abend, weil da eine Performance stattfindet. Wir sind nämlich zu Gast hier bei der Luma Foundation von Maya Hoffmann und Nils Olsen und Freddy Fischli veranstalten morgen hier ein Event mit Performance-Kunst und deswegen diese interessante Bestuhlung. Jetzt vielleicht 2, 3 Gedanken zum Kunstforum Zürich. Ich bin dort, mein Name ist Andreas Ritter, ich bin geschäftsführender Stiftungsrat. Wir sind eine Gruppe von engagierten Züricher Sammlern, die im Jahr 2017 eine Stiftung gegründet haben mit der Intention, nach Zürich interessante Talkformate, Debattenveranstaltungen auch mit kritischen Themen einzubringen. Wir hatten beispielsweise im Jahre 2017 bereits über das Kunsthaus oder die Museen der Zukunft gesprochen, hatten die Museumsdirektoren aus Zürich zu einem Roundtable eingeladen und sie befragt, zusammen mit Privatsammlern, was die sogenannte Public-Private Partnership der Zukunft sein soll. Wenn man anschaut, was jetzt im Zürcher Kunsthaus passiert ist, seit der Wiedereröffnung der Eröffnung des Chipperfield-Baus, so kann man sagen, hätten wir wahrscheinlich gescheiter eine 8-teilige Serie gemacht von Gesprächsveranstaltungen. Wir haben dann 2018 und 2019 haben wir Gesprächsformate veranstaltet zum Thema Digitalisierung, Blockchain. Wir hatten dort auch einen Künstler, Johannes Gees, mit bei uns, der sogar dann live auf der Bühne NFTs gemeint hat. Also das meine ich, wenn ich uns etwas vorstelle, wir versuchen wirklich früh Themen aufzugreifen und dazu das Gespräch in Gang zu bringen. Wenn Sie jetzt sehen, ich unterteile immer quasi unsere Tätigkeit vor der Covid-Situation und jetzt quasi nach Post-Covid. Jetzt in den nächsten 2 Wochen können Sie ja wahrscheinlich hier in Zürich alle 2 Tage eine NFT-Veranstaltung besuchen. Also das Thema greift jetzt wirklich auch im breiteren Maße. Und wir haben jetzt nach Covid ein sehr ambitioniertes Jahresprogramm in Aussicht genommen und die allererste Veranstaltung findet heute statt zum aus unserer Sicht drängendsten und wichtigsten Thema, das den Kunstmarkt hier anbetrifft, und zwar eben das Thema Kunst, ausdrücklich auch Kunstmarkt und Nachhaltigkeit. Und vielleicht, wenn ich den Bogen noch mal etwas aufspanne, wir hier in Zürich, vielleicht in der Schweiz insgesamt, wir haben anhaltend und immer noch sehr, sehr vorteilhafte Rahmenbedingungen. Wir haben herausragende Sammlungen, Privatsammlungen und Corporate-Sammlungen. Wir haben tolle Museen, wir haben einen intakten, sehr starken Kunsthandel. Wir haben die vielleicht immer noch wichtigste Messe der Welt mit der Art Basel, wir haben auch ein stabiles Rechtssystem, wir haben die Zollfreilager und so weiter und so fort. Aber das ist unsere These, wir müssen auch etwas tun, um diese Rahmenbedingungen weiter aufrechtzuerhalten. Und da ist eben das Thema Nachhaltigkeit für uns ein Thema, das, ich sage es jetzt etwas vorsichtig, in der Schweiz noch nicht recht ganz angekommen ist. Das Löwenbräu hat letztes Jahr schon eine erste Veranstaltung gemacht, weniger kunstmarktrelevant, und wir wollen das heute aufgreifen und hoffentlich so die Diskussion in Gang bringen. Jetzt, bevor ich das Mikrofon weiterreiche, habe ich einfach heute noch das Privileg, auch unseren Dank auszusprechen. Natürlich den Dank vorab an den Kooperationspartner Löwenbräu und auch an die Universität Zürich mit seinem EMAMS, seinem ambitionierten EMAMS-Programm, dann an unsere Gründer, an unsere Contributors und an unseren Freundeskreis, der uns unterstützt. Und vor allem möchte ich Dank aussprechen an unsere treuen Sponsoren, ohne die dieses Jahresprogramm nicht zu stemmen wäre. Das sind Haas & Company, mit Peter Haas, der hier heute bei uns ist, Mitunterstützer der allerersten Stunde. Es ist weiter das Auktionshaus Sotheby's mit Niederlassung in Zürich und Hauptsitz in Genf. Und natürlich sind die Auktionshäuser, wenn es ums Thema Sustainability angeht, du sitzt jetzt in der zweiten Reihe, du müsstest eigentlich in der ersten Reihe sitzen. Dann haben wir weiter dabei die Kunstversicherung Unica, die eine österreichische Versicherung ist, aber sehr stark engagiert in der Schweiz ist. Und wir haben die Privatbank Merki Baumann, die uns unterstützt, mit Sitz hier in Zürich. Und neu in den Kreis unserer Sponsoren dazugekommen ist die große Wirtschaftskanzlei Bär und Karrer mit 5 Standorten in der Schweiz. Und ich begrüße ausdrücklich die Exponenten von Bär und Karrer. Ich hoffe, sie fühlen sich wohl in unserer Runde. Besonderen Dank aussprechen möchte ich Elke Buhr, die jetzt uns durch diesen Abend führen wird. Bin froh, Elke, dass du unsere Einladung angenommen hast, hier die Moderation zu übernehmen. Und ich denke, Elke Buhr ist vielleicht die profilierteste Kunst- und Kulturjournalistin im deutschsprachigen Raum, Editor, also Chefredaktorin des deutschen Magazins Monopol. Und eben auch früh pionierhaft die Themen Art and Sustainability aufgegriffen. Bevor ich jetzt übergebe, habe ich eine schlechte und eine gute Nachricht zu überbringen. Die schlechte Nachricht leider ist, dass uns Lucia Pietrogiusti vor 4 Stunden abgesagt hat. Sie kann leider den Tag jetzt hier nicht wahrnehmen, weil sie Migräne hat. Die gute Nachricht ist, und das freut mich besonders, dass wir mit Pedro Wirz einen Künstler bei uns haben. Du hast mir eine PowerPoint-Präsentation von 50 Slides eingereicht. Dann habe ich mir schon den Kopf darüber zerbrochen, wie das in 20 Minuten zu machen ist. Ich glaube, du hast jetzt vielleicht ein paar Minuten länger und das ist vielleicht die letzte Bemerkung auch zum Kunstforum. Für uns ist es essentiell wichtig, wir richten Konferenzen oder Debates aus zu Kunstthemen und wir wollen immer explizit auch einen Künstler oder eine Künstlerin zu Wort kommen lassen. Und deswegen bin ich ganz glücklich nach deiner herausragenden, tollen Ausstellung in der Kunsthalle Basel, dass du heute als Künstler zu uns sprichst. Und sie haben das auf Ihrem Sitz vorgefunden, auch die neueste Ausgabe des Kunstbulletins. Du warst, wenn ich richtig das in Erinnerung habe, in der letzten oder vorletzten Ausgabe mit einer Ausstellung drin. Dieses Mal ist es Monika Ursina Jäger, die ebenfalls sehr stark in diesen ökologischen Themen zu Hause ist. Damit übergebe ich für den Abend, wünsche Ihnen und uns allen einen informativen, guten Austausch. Sie sind bitteschön auch aufgerufen, dann sich aktiv mit in die Diskussion einzubringen. Wir werden nach den Input-Referaten nur eine ganz kurze Pause machen und nachher genug Zeit einräumen für das Panel. Gianni Jetzer ist ja bei uns als, wie ich das gelernt habe, Incoming Director of Kunstmuseums St. Gallen. Und ich bin froh, dass es nicht 2 Jahre Incoming ist, sondern nur 1 Jahr, wie wir das hier in Zürich pflegen. Du sprichst aber vor allem auch als Kurator und jetzt nicht unbedingt in der Rolle als Museumsdirektor. Also damit bitte schön, Elke.
Ja, vielen Dank, Andreas Ritter. Ich bin sehr froh, dass ich heute hier sein kann. Ich komme immer sehr, sehr gerne nach Zürich. Ich weiß, wie fantastisch die Kunstszene in der Schweiz und auch in Zürich ist. Das Löwenbräu habe ich schon sehr, sehr oft besucht und es ist für mich immer ein tolles Erlebnis. Ich habe selbst heute schon Ausstellungen angeschaut. Ja, ich bin sehr gerne hier und ich freue mich auch sehr auf den Abend, weil das ein Thema ist, was mir und uns beim Monopol sehr am Herzen liegt und was ich glaube, was der ganzen Kunstwelt sehr am Herzen liegt und was sehr, sehr viel verändert hat schon und was aber noch viel mehr verändern wird in den nächsten Jahren. Andreas hat ja schon angedeutet, wie der Abend verläuft. Ich kann das noch mal ein bisschen expliziteren Fahrplan geben. Also nach meiner kleinen, wirklich winzigen Einführung, die noch auf Deutsch ist, wird Victoria Siddall von der Freeze die erste Keynote geben. Danach ist Pedro Wirz mit seiner Keynote dran. Dann gibt es die kleine Pause und danach kommt das Panel. Genau, da freuen wir uns schon drauf. Und, aber bevor das alles passiert, möchte ich Sie zur diesjährigen Venedig-Biennale entführen, zumindest im Geiste. Auf der Hauptausstellung der diesjährigen Venedig-Biennale, wenn man ganz, ganz durchgeht, dann wie immer, das Beste kommt zum Schluss, kommt man in den Raum von Precious Okoyemon im Arsenale. Ich weiß nicht, ob jemand von Ihnen schon da war oder Fotos gesehen hat. Das ist ein ganz fantastischer Raum, eine fantastische Installation. Man fühlt sich, als würde man einen wirklichen Garten betreten. Man läuft da durch, das Wasser plätschert hindurch, es gibt Erde, es wurde gepflanzt, es gibt wilden Wein und Zuckerrübenpflanzen, eine Anspielung auf die Kolonialgeschichte. Die afroamerikanische Künstlerin Precious Okoyemon beschäftigt sich sehr mit mit der Dekolonisierung und da erheben sich so Pflanzengöttinnen, die keine Gesichter haben, aber von denen man denkt, die regieren hier und die Menschen sind eigentlich fast überflüssig. Und die Installation hat sie genannt To See the Earth Before the End of the World. Sie ist auf der Suche nach Wissensformen und Existenzformen jenseits des sogenannten westlichen Bewusstseins. Das beinhaltet nicht nur das Ende der weißen Vorherrschaft, sondern auch eine Feier der Natur, die Resilienz der Natur, die wieder an die Stelle rücken soll, von der die Menschen in ihrer Egozentrik, in ihrer Anthropozentrik sie verdrängt haben. Nicht nur Okoyemon hat solche Themen im Moment, die ganze Biennale war voll davon, die ganze zeitgenössische Kunst ist voll davon, es gibt einen wirklichen Paradigmenwechsel, viele Künstler und Künstlerinnen wollen weg vom sogenannten Anthropozän, sie kritisieren, wie sehr wir die Erde geprägt haben, wie sehr wir sie zerstören und der ökologische Umbau ist also inhaltlich in der Kunst schon total angekommen. Auf der anderen Seite muss aber die Kunstwelt, wenn sie solche Inhalte hat, auch selber umsetzen, was da gefordert wird. Also man muss auch ganz praktisch seine eigene Produktionsweise überdenken, sonst kann man natürlich nicht glaubwürdig solche Inhalte präsentieren. Und die Entwicklung in diese Richtung ist wirklich rasant. Also es ist 3 Jahre her, seitdem wir im Monopol-Magazin mal einen offenen Brief an die damalige deutsche Kulturstaatsministerin Monika Grütters veröffentlicht haben für einen Green New Deal für die Kunst. Und den haben damals zahlreiche Museumsdirektoren und Direktorinnen unterschrieben und KünstlerInnen. Und da ging es darum, Entwicklungen in Deutschland anzustoßen, die es beispielsweise in Großbritannien schon gibt. Nämlich, dass von zentraler Stelle es Hilfe dabei gibt, den ökologischen Umbau von Institutionen voranzubringen. Weil die Frage ist ja, wie macht man das eigentlich? Und es gibt ja dafür Tools, die wurden in Großbritannien von NGOs entwickelt, wie Institutionen ihren CO2-Fußabdruck zum Beispiel erstmal ermitteln können und wie sie dann kann man Benchmarks entwickeln, wie Institutionen praktisch Best-Practice-Beispiele zeigen können und wie auch Institutionen voneinander lernen wollen. Und das haben wir gefordert für Deutschland damals, dass das von zentraler Stelle angestoßen wird, damit nicht jede Institution und jeder Einzelne immer von vorne anfangen muss und die ganze Recherche machen muss. Und in Deutschland ist es zumindest langsam in die Gänge gekommen. Also es gibt mittlerweile ein Netzwerk Nachhaltigkeit für die Kultur in Deutschland. Es gibt staatliche Hilfen, auch von der Bundeskulturstiftung gibt es Projekte. Erste Institutionen haben zum Beispiel ihren CO2-Austausch untersucht. Und eine kleine Recherche von mir hat ergeben, auch in der Schweiz gibt es kleine Ansätze dafür. Also es gibt zum Beispiel das Netzwerk für Nachhaltigkeit in Kunst und Kultur, das von der Mercator-Stiftung unterstützt wird. Da gibt es das Projekt Happy Museums und da werden auch kleinere Nachhaltigkeitsprojekte unterstützt. Aber ich denke, insgesamt ist das erst ein Anfang, weil es ist wirklich nicht so, als würden jetzt alle, als wäre das durchgehend, sondern das sind immer noch so Pilotprojekte und die Leute fangen langsam an und trotzdem, es gibt immer viele Widerstände. Und aber die Bereiche, in denen man arbeiten muss, sind ja vielfältig. Also es geht um Energieverbrauch, es geht um Lagerung, Transport, um Reisen, um Ausstellungsorganisation. Überall gibt es Handlungsbedarf. Und genau darüber wollen wir heute reden. Und wir wollen versuchen, den inhaltlichen Bogen zu spannen von der Kunst und von dem, was die Kunst an Einstellungswandel auch bewirken kann, hin zu den praktischen Dingen. Und auch immer wieder hin und her springen, weil alle unsere Akteure sich mit verschiedenen Aspekten davon beschäftigen und dann jeweils immer wieder den Bogen schlagen. Auch, also wir wollen jetzt nicht den ganzen Tag über CO2-Zahlen reden, aber auch wir reden über Kunst und wir reden über Zahlen, über beides. Und ich glaube, genau deswegen kann das sehr fruchtbar werden. Und als erste Keynote-Sprecherin darf ich Ihnen jetzt Victoria Siddall ankündigen. Sie hat den Kunstmarkt, wie wir ihn kennen, mitgeprägt. Sie war lange Jahre Direktorin der Kunstmesse Frieze in London. Mittlerweile ist sie dort als Non-Executive Director tätig und sie ist außerdem Chair im Board der Trustees des Londoner Projektraums Studio Voltaire. Und vor allen Dingen heute ist sie unter anderem hier, weil sie Mitbegründerin der Gallery Climate Coalition ist. Das ist eine Organisation, wo auch mittlerweile international sich Galerien und Institutionen angeschlossen haben. Die haben sich zusammengeschlossen, um gemeinsam den Weg der Nachhaltigkeit zu gehen. Victoria, I just introduced you in German. Now we will switch to English. And I'm very happy that you're here, and I'm looking forward to your keynote. Putting sustainability into practice is your topic.
Thank you. Guten Abend. Good evening. Thank you very much, Andreas Ritter and Elke Böhr, everyone at Kunstforum Zurich, for inviting me to speak. And thank you to everyone in the audience today who's joined us to engage in this important topic, a Green Deal for Art. So yes, thank you, Elke, for the kind introduction. As you said, I am Victoria Siddall. Until recently, I was Global Director of Frieze and was there running the fairs for 18 years. Until 2 months ago, when I stepped into a board role and non-executive role, and more relevant today, I am a co-founder and trustee of Gallery Climate Coalition, which is an international charity and membership organization providing environmental sustainability goals and guidelines for the art sector. And that is what I'm going to talk about today. So when it comes to the impact of art and the art world on environmental issues, there are two distinct aspects that we can consider. One is the vital and powerful role that art and artists play in influencing and inspiring and affecting change. And I'm sure that's what we will hear from Pedro. And if Lucia Petruski was here to join us, I know as a curator, she works very much around this sort of looking at how art and artists sort of engage with this topic in a sort of conceptual way. And the Serpentines program in that area has been exemplary and incredibly interesting and inspiring. On that subject, there was an article in the New York Times recently by Zoe Lescaze, who talked about how art and artists during the AIDS crisis in New York in the 1980s made incredibly powerful work that was really vital in raising awareness and ultimately affecting political change. So I'm starting with this point because I don't want to underplay the power that art and artists have when it comes to huge global issues like this, and how important our sector can be in actually inspiring change. However, I'm here to talk about the other aspect, which is the more practical aspects of how, as a community and an industry, we can cut our carbon emissions. Gallery Climate Coalition falls very much into that second camp, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. So Gallery Climate Coalition, for short GCC, which we'll refer to. Sorry, did you say something?
Oh, no, just tell me when I have to...
I will,
thank
you. We're good for now.
Sorry.
Thank you. GCC was founded by a group of galleries, writers, and others in the art world, art fair organizers such as myself, who recognized that everybody we spoke with in the art world really cared about this issue and was really concerned about what they could do, and wanted to make changes. But the art world really is made up of a collective of individuals and small businesses. And as those individuals and small businesses, we just didn't have the guidance, the tools, the infrastructure, and the kind of community platforms to actually make changes and to know what to do. So the reason we've called this a coalition is because it's about strength in numbers. It's about bringing everybody together behind the same goals, galvanizing our art community, providing really accurate resources and information that galleries in particular, but really the whole art world can use to reduce their carbon emissions, and also to give us lobbying power. As an individual, it's very hard to change an industry or an aspect of it that isn't working, but if we all come together and get on the same page, it's surprisingly, easy to actually make those things happen. This all happened actually at the beginning of 2020. The pandemic, while of course awful in every other sense, did actually afford us the opportunity to stop and to spend real time and energy on this. And of course, everything else in the world stopped too. There wasn't any travel, there wasn't any shipping. So the timing of this has been fortuitous in that as we've launched Gallery Climate Coalition, it's as the world emerges from a pandemic, and it gives everybody the opportunity to kind of rebuild more mindfully and maybe think about the trips we're making, the work we're shipping, whatever it is that we find is the main sort of contributor to our own carbon emissions. Could we move to the next slide, please, Oka?
Yes. Working on it. Yes.
So these are the key goals of Gallery Climate Coalition. And as you'll see, it's very simple. There are two. It's a minimum 50% reduction in carbon emissions across the sector by 2030. And the reason we landed on this is because this is the goal of the Paris Agreement. And so this isn't something that was obviously made up with the art world. It's something that is, a sort of universally acknowledged and important goal to meet. So the idea is to get the art industry in line with the Paris Agreement. And then the second is around zero waste. And this is somewhere where we know a lot of improvement can be made in the art world as well. And I'm sure there'll be more discussion about that on the panel later, which I'm really looking forward to. So our members sign up to these goals, essentially. When somebody goes onto the Gallery Climate Coalition website to join as a member, these are the things that they are getting behind. And they are saying, yes, we will do our best to try to achieve these two goals. It's free to join. And that was because, even though, of course, there are costs to staffing GCC, building a website, developing all these resources, we didn't want there to be a barrier to anybody joining. And in fact, that's been very effective in terms of numbers. If we move to the next slide, I can just take you through where GCC now stands. So we launched in October 2020, it's about a year and a half ago. There are now 800 members from 20 countries. So it's been a really rapid growth and more than we ever anticipated, which is really great to see. They break down, the other thing to say is that the name suggests that Gallery Climate Coalition is very much for galleries. And that's actually where we started, because we saw there was a gap for commercial galleries without anybody providing these resources and goals and kind of, community to achieve the goals. But actually we found that GCC is now really serving the whole art world. And we're kind of developing our resources accordingly. So as you can see, there are over 300 commercial galleries, but there are also 120 institutions and nonprofits. There are over 100 artists and collectors, over 160 other art businesses. There are individuals. So it's become incredibly broad. And essentially our ambition now is to kind of serve the whole art sector individually and help anybody who wants that sort of guidance to be part of a coalition that enables them to sort of lower their carbon emissions and footprint. Sorry, I think I'm just checking where we are on slides. Can we have a look at the next slide, please? So this also gives you an idea of how it breaks down. And I included this because I think it's kind of interesting to see where everybody comes from. Obviously, there are galleries, but there are auction houses. Christie's is a member, art fairs, Frieze and Art Basel, both members. There are many galleries, of course, but also curators, conservators, museums, journalists, academics, advisors, registrars, publications, art schools, collectors. So really we're kind of reaching all aspects of the art world. And we realized how important this is because it's really every link in the chain that needs to be on board with this. If just a gallery says, we're going to cut our carbon emissions, but their artists aren't on board with it and the collectors they're selling to aren't on board with it, just doesn't really work. So that's why we've kind of expanded to really try to bring the whole art world together around this issue. And slide 5 shows the geographies that we have been most focused on to date. And as you can see, so GCC started in London. So we have a dedicated group in London of volunteers who come together regularly to discuss issues around sustainability. Berlin followed quite soon after London. They came to us and said, we'd like to start our own group. And we thought, fantastic, great to have another international group. And based on the success of that, we have then brought together groups in Los Angeles. And that was helped by LA MoCA, who have their own environmental council, and they helped to bring together a group of galleries. And most recently, we launched Italy, which is across 3 cities, Milan, Rome, and Naples, and galleries and institutions and others from those 3 cities. And that's been really successful so far. You can see the ones in the works include Sao Paulo, Japan, Brussels, Barcelona, New York, Mexico City. We'd love to add Zurich to that list. So any volunteers in the audience, please let me know. The next slide goes into, oh no, sorry, Mr.
Back?
Slide. It's fine. I will give you just some background on the resources we provide. So the number one thing we wanted to provide to galleries from the beginning was a carbon calculator. So this was a very complicated thing to build. We actually built it with Art Logic, and they did all the work for free initially. They were part of the founding team. And they've built an online carbon calculator that enables galleries to, or anybody, frankly, you could use it right now on your phone if you wanted to go online. And every time you take a trip, ship a work of art, pay an energy bill, you can feed it into the calculator. And if you're logged in, at the end of the year, it will give you your carbon report for the year. It's not as accurate as getting a company in to do a full-scale carbon audit for you, but actually it's as long as it's the same point of measurement year on year, then it actually does a good job. And we've had a lot of people using it, partly to do their annual carbon reports, but also it's free to use and it's actually quite fun to play with. So it's good just for awareness. You can have a look at what the emissions are for your return flight to Los Angeles, for example, or the difference in traveling to Venice by plane or by train. And, it's sort of there at the tip of your fingers just to sort of make these comparisons. And, the idea of it partly was just to build this sort of awareness of what causes emissions, but also to give a starting point to measure. It's kind of impossible to reduce if you don't know where you're starting from. So the first step that we've really encouraged galleries and other members to do is to fill in their carbon report. As you can see, we have one here from Hauser and Wirth. I'm going to show you some of the ones that were submitted so far by galleries and one institution, mainly because it's really interesting to see the difference between a gallery's carbon audit and an institution's carbon audit. So Hauser and Wirth, as you can see here, very big international gallery. Shipping is over half of their annual carbon emissions, which is the blue, as you can see on the graph. And then it's travel and building energy. But shipping and travel make up a huge quantity of that. If we move on to the next one. This is Nottingham Contemporary. So this is an institution. So Nottingham Contemporary is a museum in the UK, and they use the Gallery Climate Coalition calculator to do their audit. And you see the big difference here is the amount of green there, which is building energy. So their audit is over 90% building energy. So it's a completely different issue to the commercial gallery, essentially. So this has been real education for us, because we can see that the resources and the goals required by an institution are probably going to be very different to those required by a commercial gallery. So that allows GCC to kind of adapt the resources accordingly to serve museums as much as it does to commercial galleries. The next one, I think we have one more here as well. So this is Modern Art, which is a London-based gallery. I just wanted to show one more commercial gallery as well. Obviously, Hauser and Wirth, as we said, huge footprint in many different cities around the world. Modern Art just based in London. Travel actually makes up the majority of theirs, but again, it's travel and shipping together over 90%. So these audits really help to focus the mind to see, you know, I think as visual people in the art world, we can often be led more towards the things we can see, things like plastic bottles and so on. And I'm not undermining the importance of dealing with plastic waste. That's obviously it's one of our goals as well. But what this does is really help to focus the mind on where the carbon emissions are. And if we're talking about climate change and carbon emissions, it's really focused on travel and shipping for commercial galleries. So we're producing dedicated resources to address all of these areas, working with environmental experts. And now we're expanding our resources to take into account the needs of artists and institutions. The Tate actually recently used the GCC carbon calculator to measure the emissions from their Anakiyi turbine hall installation. So these are proving to be really useful tools that we hope will really help the art world meet these goals in the long term. Next slide, please. So these are areas in which we have active volunteer committees producing dedicated resources. So we've talked about shipping. We've added insurance there too, because actually one of the responses we had from galleries when we started talking about shipping was that while they wanted to ship by sea and land, because often it was, you know, it's obviously far lower carbon emissions than air freight, often the response from the shippers was that the insurers wouldn't insure works to be shipped by sea. So then we turned to the insurers as well. And actually there was a big meeting at Lloyd's of London of all the art insurers coming together to address the fact that a lot of galleries are now putting pressure on them to make sea freight more insurable. So again, this is an example of what you can do as a coalition, essentially, and the kind of lobbying power you have when you can all come together and focus on a single issue. Printing and publishing, conservation, travel, registrars, circularity. On that note, actually, there's an organization called BARDA, which is already live in Los Angeles and is going to launch in other places, which again is about circularity and resource sharing. It's a really simple website where you can upload a picture of a plinth or a piece of electrical equipment or anything relating to a museum or anything relating to an exhibition that you don't need anymore, or a crate, and someone else can just come and take it. So instead of these things just being thrown away, it allows for kind of resource sharing, which is obviously something that is really helpful for, you know, younger galleries on tighter budgets, as well as being something that avoids waste. And packaging materials, that's been particularly interesting as well. And if you look on the GCC website, there is the result of all of this research, and it's all there, it's all freely accessible. The packaging and materials one's very interesting. There are a lot of different kind of materials in the works that you know, are not single use, essentially, alternatives to things like bubble wrap in particular. We have also just launched as GCC our sustainable shipping campaign, which went live last week, and that was the culmination of over a year's work, and targets the main source of emissions in our industry. We've been working closely with the shippers and with environmental experts on this. So again, please take a look at that if you'd like more kind of depth on that issue in particular, because we hope that that's going to help to drive real change. The other thing that GCC does is, you know, sort of create content around these issues to kind of bring it to life and, you know, engage audiences in what we're doing and learning and talking about. We had a fantastic talk by Tino Siddall that he did online a few months ago, in which he described his kind of journeys around the world without taking a plane. He's been on a lot of boats and a lot of trains and has a lot of tales to go with that. We also held our first Gallery Climate Coalition conference in London in November last year. We had speakers from the artist Fiona Banner, Gus Casely-Hayford, who's director of V&A East. They were on the more kind of artists and curatorial ideas panel. And then we had our kind of nuts and bolts and practicality panel, including Sam Thorne, director of Nottingham Contemporary, whose carbon audit you just saw, and Danny Chivers, who's been our environmental expert in London, who's been invaluable in kind of pointing us in the right direction as we build our resources. Can we see the next slide, please? So I mentioned at the beginning, there are two ways that our industry can approach this. There is actually a third thing that I wanted to talk about, because it is something that is fairly unique to the art world. In our conversations in the founding of Gallery Climate Coalition, we realized early on that the art world is also very good at raising money and getting attention. When we were introduced to Client Earth, who are an extraordinary environmental law firm, who essentially take the earth as their client, and they're a charity. We wanted to do both of these things for them. We were so inspired by the work they do that we thought one of the most impactful things that we could do as sort of members of the art community was help raise money for Client Earth, but also raise awareness of them in the art world. So an example of the kind of work they do, they recently, I think last year, forced the Polish government to close down 15 coal-fired power stations, which were causing extremely high levels of carbon emissions. And just to put this in perspective, and this is a statistic that slightly blew my mind, the emissions, the carbon emissions annually from one of these power stations was 4 times the emissions of Europe's biggest airline. So that's really, you know, off the charts in terms of anything that we could do as the art, as the art world in terms of reducing. And while it is, it is on all of our shoulders to make these changes, supporting someone like Client Earth, who can make these massive, sweeping, positive changes overnight, felt like a very good use of our time and resources. So we set about organizing a series of auctions to benefit Client Earth. And these were works that were donated by artists and galleries who showed extreme generosity in doing so. This image you see on the screen is a painting by Cecily Brown that she painted for her series at Blenheim Palace. And she very generously donated it along with Thomas Dane Gallery. It was sold at Christie's in October last year for over £2 million. We then had a painting, also incredibly generous donation from Rashid Johnson, that was sold in New York in November for over $2 million. And you'll notice these paintings are being sold in the city in which they are currently present. So we're not having to ship things around the world, which would be slightly against our messaging. Then Anthony Gormley gave us an amazing sculpture that was sold in February. Nanzing gave us a painting that was sold in Hong Kong last December. And we have a painting by Beatriz Milhazes, the Brazilian artist, which is incredible work that will be sold in London in June. So that's enabled us to raise over $6 million so far for the work of Client Earth. And to put it in perspective, the cost for them to close down a power station, a coal-fired power station that is causing, phenomenal amounts of carbon emissions is about £300,000. So this is a way that artists in particular and the art world can have a real impact on the future of the planet. And we felt quite excited when we realized what we were able to do in that area, and hope we'll be able to continue with that series. Next slide, please. I don't know if you'll be able to photograph this in there, but this QR code takes you to the GCC website. But it's fairly easy to find if you want to have a look at it later on. GCC is a charity, and as I said, the key thing here is to sign up as a member. Everybody is welcome. And please also donate if you can, but most importantly, use the resources. They're there. We want them to be as widely used as possible. If you're working in an organization and you don't have a green team, the first step that we recommend is forming a green team of individuals within your organization who feel passionately about this and want to make a change. There are kind of guidelines to forming a green team on the GCC website. And I think I wanted to end actually on a point that came up in a panel discussion I was in about this recently. And the final question that was put to us all was, do you have hope? And the resounding answer was yes. I think obviously that's what drives us all in wanting to create a better world and, you know, like maintain the great privileges we have for the future. But I think one of the reasons that it gives me hope is that the momentum around this now, the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation now, probably wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. We would not have 800 members of GCC. We would not have organised a conference in London that was sold out with 280 seats. So yes, lots of reasons to be hopeful for change. At the end of the GCC conference in November, Ben Okri, who's the British Nigerian poet, he said something that really stayed with me. He said, you are the art world and you consider yourself a small part of a bigger problem, but you are an extremely important part of it because you deal with vision and how people see and how they clarify their perception of the world. Art is potentially extremely powerful in the possibilities of climate change and should be one of the leaders. So I'll end on that point. Thank you so much for listening. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Victoria. That was great. Here's the first question already. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Can you introduce yourself and then...
Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Johanna Zuleta, and I am a cross-pollinator, and I'm UK-based between London and Glasgow. We're very happy to carry on this conversation in person next time in London after Documenta around the 20th of June. I work particularly advancing the same topics, but congratulations on all that you have done for the industry. I started my life in 3 different fields between politics, the corporate world, and arts and culture, and now I bring them more together. So I'm in Switzerland because I was in Davos last week at the World Economic Forum, and the idea is to bring more of the humanities into the table and into the narratives, both the future of the world, which are seldomly included over there, and simultaneously to bring more of this conversation to the policymakers, because also what I see mostly when I am in the sustainability conferences or the art conferences is they are not talking as fluidly to each other. So I'm happy to help on that. Thank you.
Oh, that was what the question? No
Yes.
question. You were just introducing yourself, actually.
Yeah, it was, I just wanted to say to Victoria
Okay.
that, but I would also like to know where are they in that realm with policymakers too in the conversation, both in the UK and globally.
Okay. There was a question back there. Can you please hand the microphone?
Hi, my name is Patricia. I'm a Swiss Austrian living in Zurich, studying economics and sustainable development. Sustainable development is among economic, ecological, and social sustainability. So what is your approach in social sustainability when it comes to keeping art in free ports because of not paying taxes, hiding those money of local taxpayers, which actually funding museums and not showing art, etc.? Or is it your only approach to ecological sustainability?
Sorry, I couldn't hear all of it. It was cutting out a little bit. You're asking about the approach to
social sustainability. For example, keeping art in free ports. Swiss TV published weeks ago a very good documentary about those millions worth it art in Geneva Freeport, among others, because of tax reason. Wealthy people not want to pay taxes, and those art pieces are never shown to the public. They never are here leaving those centers because they do not want to pay taxes. So is there? I mean, look,
I think it's a very it's a good question, and a you know, I have my own thoughts on it, but I think that's a different conference.
Because everybody's always talking about sustainability, but many people forget sustainability has 3 dimensions. And the social sustainability is, in my opinion, is a very important part, which is maybe not so sexy, like keeping plastic out of seas, etc. But
no, it's a really good point. I think, you know, the focus today for us has been, you know, it's been environment, but and for GCC very much so. But yes, listen, it's a very important area, and you know, it's good to hear this is something you're focused on.
Another question. You're in the dark, so over there.
Hello, I'm Robert. You showed that travel is one of the big levers that can change the CO2 emissions. And I'm just wondering, what are ways of cutting those emissions that you've discovered that are actually actually doing the job?
So you're asking how the art world manages with that traveling?
Yes, because I think it's still very attractive. I mean,
it's a really good question. And look, I think I should say as well that, you know, GCC was founded by a group of, you know, predominantly gallery owners, and we're not sort of saying stop traveling, stop shipping, stop doing your business, because that would be, you know, that would be really counterproductive. The idea is that this is something that can be worked into the art industry as it stands. You know, we know that it's a really important, sort of job market as well. And we're not suggesting that galleries stop doing what they do, essentially, or museums, of course. But there are mindful decisions that can be made. And this, again, as I said, where the calculator comes in. You know, for example, we launched a campaign before Venice, which was about taking the train instead of flying. That just, you know, when it arrives in the inbox, there's about 800 members as they're thinking ahead to their travel, saying, all right, this is the difference in emissions between flying from London to Venice or wherever it is and taking the train. And we did the same thing before Basel last year, Basel in Switzerland. It's like, take the train to Basel, like, you know, have a think about this. And, you know, just be aware of the impact of sort of decisions around travel. I think, look, it's what the pandemic has shown us, and especially the periods since things have opened up again, is the importance of seeing art in person and seeing people in person, you know. And I don't think that's ever going to change. But, you know, I think perhaps the days of a gallery sending 20 of their staff to an art fair, you know, might now be done. Maybe it's more like 5, you know. So I think it's not saying don't do these things. It's like, just think about what's really necessary in terms of travel. Maybe don't fly halfway around the world just for a dinner and then fly back. And I think the more awareness and mindfulness there is around this decision making, and the more awareness of the impact of your decisions and your actions, then the rest of it will follow, essentially. So, as I said, GCC is kind of providing that motivation, but also kind of practical resource, so that you're just aware. You know, even things like that most people didn't necessarily know, the emissions of flying business class are double what they are flying economy on the same plane, because you're taking up double the amount of space. So that doesn't go down great with everybody, obviously, but it's a consideration, you know. And it's just like knowing these things. And again, the calculator is really useful in that regard, because it includes which class you're flying in, and it tells you the difference. Yeah, there's a lot to be done around travel. But I think, you know, the other point around lobbying, and this is not something that we've got to yet, but I think environmental organizations, I'm sure, are, you know, are thinking about this already, is that, you know, the emissions from air travel are so much higher than they are for train travel. And yet train travel is so much more expensive than air travel. I think, I mean, in Europe, but I think also in the UK. And that's somewhere where governments can really make a difference, and where lobbying governments can make a difference. Because if the governments were subsidizing train travel instead of subsidizing the airline industry, then, you know, and making it much less expensive, then, for example, if I'm in London and I want to go to Edinburgh, it costs about half the amount for me to fly than it does to get the train, which is crazy. You know, that should just be the other way around. Like that's a kind of simple thing that governments could do. I realize I'm simplifying it, but it's there are things like that I hope to see change in the coming years.
Okay, thank you, Victoria. That was really great and very practical, and also giving hope. Okay, do we have one last? No, we don't. There's one last short question before we really have to go on.
Hello?
Yeah.
Perfect. So my name is Caroline, and I wanted to know, I didn't check out the whole website yet, but do you actually display all the information that the galleries upload to it? Because I think on one side it could maybe backfire if somebody has like not the whole green circle, but maybe it would be a nice interpretation or a nice idea if you would upload in every maybe 2 months new datas, and introduce something like a green bonus point and display those, then the people would have an incentive of like getting better from time to time, and then the information would not be displayed completely.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, actually. And I should have said, when I was showing the carbon orders of the galleries, you know, I really applaud the galleries who are happy to share this data openly, because, you know, it's extremely open of them to share this, allow us to put it on our website. If you look at the website, there are a number of other carbon audits. You can see one from Thomas Dane Gallery, Listen Gallery, Kate McGarry, alongside the ones you've just seen on the screen. So there are a number of carbon audits that are there. There's actually one from Frieze as well, for Frieze London, a couple of years ago. So we're trying to encourage that kind of transparency. However, it's not enforced, you know, because the most important thing, as I said, is that galleries use the tool. So the audit itself, if a gallery goes online and uses our carbon calculator and does their audit, that's entirely confidential. Like we don't even have the data. So it's up to the galleries to send it back and provide it if they're happy for us to publish it. But, you know, we're encouraging galleries to kind of talk about this stuff on social media. You know, we formed a green team and we filled in our carbon audit, and to celebrate these milestones, essentially, and to make it something that everybody then feels they ought to be part of, and they ought to be doing the same thing. So the more kind of promotion around this, the more talk around it, the better. And we are thinking ahead, actually, as to how we, you know, really kind of flag the galleries on our website who are very active and making steps forward in this area. So watch this space. There will be more in that area to come.
Okay, we will watch the space. We will watch the Gallery Climate Coalition, and we're really happy about your initiative and really admire you for all the things you've done now. And I think from tomorrow on in Zurich, there will be a local group. I hope so that people are already thinking what they can do and how they can proceed with that. So Victoria, thank you so much for that great input. And yeah, I think now we will release you to a hopefully sunny evening without any more carbons. and we will go on with Pedro. So first maybe the technique. Bye, Victoria. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unser nächster Keynote-Speaker, Pedro Wirz, ist geboren in Brasilien, dort aufgewachsen als Kind von Agrarwissenschaftlern und Biologen. Und also er hängt irgendwo zwischen, er ist beeinflusst von Naturwissenschaften, gleichzeitig aber auch von sowas wie Volkskultur und Mythologien. Heute lebt er in Zürich, hat kürzlich, wie Andreas schon erwähnte, eine fantastische Ausstellung in Basel gezeigt, in der Kunsthalle Basel. Und er verknüpft dort Themen wie Kolonialismus, Rohstoffhandel, technologischen Fortschritt, Klimawandel, Artensterben und sinnsuchende Mythen. Seine Ausstellung hieß Environmental Hangover, was ein sehr schöner Titel ist und was er bestimmt noch erklären wird, was er damit meint. Und sein Vortrag heißt Everything is Food for Something. Und ich bin sehr gespannt und freue mich auf Pedro Wirz.
Erstmal guten Nachmittag. Vielen Dank, dass ihr alle hier seid. Es bedeutet mir sehr viel. Vielen Dank die Einladung von Kunstforum, Aviva, Andreas, Löwenbräukunst, Jacke. Ich möchte auch noch ganz kurz wirklich, noch genau meinen Galeristen bedanken, Philipp und Saskia, die heute hier sind, die keep on believing. Oh, I'm going to do it in English, by the way. Forgot about that. Much better. Thank you. Yes, and I also want to quickly thank you, Leonie, my partner in life. She keeps on believing me much stronger than everyone else, basically. I really wanted to thank Nina von Büren, who is actually my mentor and my advisor and my best, very good friend when it comes to climate subject matters. And I really want to thank my studio manager, Anais Frau von Löwenbräukunst. She makes everything rolls. And here I am. Yes, my name is Pedro Wirz. I was born in Pindamonhangaba in Brazil. I'm actually Swiss-Brazilian artist living in Zurich. I was born in 1981 in a town called Pindamonhangaba, which is a city that belongs to a valley in Brazil called Vale do Paraíba. It's actually a very important area in Brazil. As you see, it's in between São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. These two very big, important cities, Brazilian cities, where the money is. And this valley has a historical, economical, social importance because during the time that Brazil was a colony, the royals, they would ambulate between these two big cities, and basically every time they would need a rest, they would stay in this valley while ambulating between these two zones. And through this, many cities will be funded along the river, the Rio Paraíba, and of course that makes demographic growth higher. So we had a lot of course, because there was a river anyway, there was a lot of indigenous people living there before, and then comes the colonizers, Portuguese people crashed with indigenous people, and then later we have also a lot of slaves that came later also to integrate the population of this region, and much later all the other waves of immigrants, Japanese people, Lebanese people. And that makes the mythology and the folklore of this very specific area very, very rich. And I had the privilege to grow up in this area and be to be nurtured through this path of imagination and fantasy and reality, actually. Also, what is important fact? Sorry, I will be repeating myself to some of you. Excuse me. I am a son of a. It should not be like this. I'm sorry. They look normal, actually. Agronomist, Swiss-born, Brazilian-born Swiss, segundo agronomist, my father, and my mother, she is not a snake killer. She is a biologist, and she's not preparing dinner. They found it dead, by the way. So and this, my father was doing research on frogs, and my mother was doing research in bees. So basically, this is the environment I grew up with, right? Like these two subjective and objective worlds, like being educated through mythology and legends of the forest, and like learning scientific facts at home, and mostly also reading this literature. Here you see an image of basically pretty much how I grew up. My parents are very crazy about plants and animals. So I once told you guys in this very same place 2 years ago that my father has this thing that there was no like difference of contracts of hierarchy between like, if it would be that bad to kill an animal or a small insect than to beat my brother. So that's pretty much the mindset of growing up in Pindamonhangaba with this family. And just also just one thing, I was ready to do in 20 minutes, by the way. Okay, just standing a little bit. So this is zone, so just to visually exemplify how abundant and fruitful it is. And then what happens is 21 years later, I ended up, although I was doing art, I had a band doing drawings, I did theater long, and I ended up not being accepted in the music academy, so I finally studied public relations. And because I can speak, I guess, for audiences, I got very good positions because, as mentioned, there was also very big growth economically in this valley, so many important industry was based also in this place, like General Motors, or all the car industry in Brazil. The poles are also there around the city. And I had the chance to be a trainee on General Motors and then in Ford Motor Company. I did also, at the end of my public relations career, as a very young man, I was the director of public, very young director of the Department of Communication for Vivendi Environnement, which is like a French company that takes care of trash. And basically, they were doing what I was doing. I was doing communication for a very big landfill, as you see here, eine Müllhalde auf Deutsch. And this is the time where also we start to talk about Kyoto credits. I think some of you know what it is, but it's just the same as we do with compensation. Some countries or some people generate too much carbon, so they have to pay, etc. Right? And what we're doing here, this is also the time where the technology of vaporization to generate energy, what we use here in Switzerland, like we burn the trash and generate energy. This landfill, they have the possibility to import one of those machines, so I also involved with the implementation of this technology in this landfill, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So basically, growing up the way I grew up and being in public relations for a landfill is not the most comfortable thing to do if you learning what I learned. So fast enough, I quit this job and I moved to Switzerland, to Europe first. Can I drink your water? Or no, there's one, right? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Cheers. Yeah, so I come to Europe and then I study art. Then So as an artist, I am a sculptor. Mostly, I do objects. I really care about how materials come together, right? Because I'm not like the sculpture the way we define the word initially. Like I'm not carving sometimes, but I'm not like taking material out of a bigger part. I'm like more gluing stuff together. In my work, I really like to bring together these two kingdoms of existence: the artificial and the natural. What we say natural. So, for example, those objects, which is like one of the first series I produced, they're egg-shaped objects. They're rest of debris of textile that I glue together using latex, rubber, and also like non-processed materials as soils or like fibers, plant fibers, to generate this objects. I'm not gonna. I was thinking not to speak about all the images. I'm just gonna move forward. Okay. Yeah. So here's a show in Paris. I did for a couple of years. And then just also to show that I am like all of us. This is a show in a problem in Los Angeles. Here another example of materials that those are old toys, kid toys that I buy online secondhand, and I embed them in beeswax. It's kind of like a flood image from above, right? But again, this like man-made with known man-made material coming together. Image of this in Berlin at the gallery Nagel Draxler. Some of the objects. I mean, I wanted to show those because I say I'm a sculptor, but also lately I have been going up to the walls and like thinking volume as a relief, like how to construct volume just being still on the walls. And although this could seems like a economical strategy to make my life easier, I think this is because I wanted to also think about displays, because it's not only, I also want people to look at those objects and think about technology and how non-human technology can also, in fantasy, coexist. This is my show in New York, where those are like old dolls, dolls that I, puppe. So I covered them with soil. Yeah, another show, and then we go on. Okay, so this is me, artist. Okay, and then it comes like what I forgot to say. This valley is actually inside of the second. I mean, I say the second because it's not the biggest biome. The rainforest biome in Brazil. We have two in the south: the Mata Atlântica, where I grew up, and the Amazon forest on the north. And what I did when I got invited to do the show at the Kunsthalle Basel, I also forgot to say this in the beginning, excuse me, I'm going to talk about me, the research, and then the show at the Kunsthalle. When I got invited to the show at the Kunsthalle Basel, talking to my partner Leonie, we talk, of course, a lot about all this subject matter. There was a wish of expand the nutrition of my practice, not only that should be related to my biography, what I have been doing, but I want to understand more global problems, and not only through metaphors or like to text that I have read on internet or newspaper, but I wanted to go see what was cooking. And because I'm Brazilian and because I have this interest on fauna and flora, I went to see the Amazon forest. So I applied for a grant from the Arts Council of Switzerland, Petro Wirz, and got some money and went there and stay in the city called Altamira, which is a very interesting city when you start to talk about the Amazon, because it's a place where many things started. Because we, as citizens of, like the Brazilians, during the dictatorship, that's around end of the 60s in Brazil, they had this idea of colonize, which is amazing, colonize its own country. Colonize this area of the country that was not being used, right? Forgetting that there was like plants, animals, and people living there for millennia. So what they start to do, they start to build this huge, long highway, the Transamazônica, that crossed the country from east to west, right? Well, it would be it goes also from that way. You can drive both ways, by the way. And then I went there to visit this place, and then here's some quick images. This is the Rio Xingu, which is I think the third biggest river of the Amazonic basin. And I went to visit also the city because there they just finished the construction of the second biggest water dam of planetary, which caused a huge problems to some communities, humans or non-humans, existing in this place, because of course if you build a water dam, you have to count on flood, like huge flood, right? And also like if you have flood on our side, on the other side there will be drawn. So here it's me taking an image from one of the indigenous protected zones there in this corner of the river. And you can see the stones. Might look like beauty, but this means the water is really low. So yeah, then I went to see the forest to visit. I went to visit a lot of problems or known problems. This is the highway I visit. I had the chance to engage with a lot of local communities, because maybe important to say here, my father's agronomist, right, and one of his buddies from college time is one of a very engaged person on the protection of the Amazon. So he also like put me in contact with a lot of people that I should have talked. So those guys here are illegal miners of the Bahia, but they were not afraid to talk with an artist. I'm not but let's move so we don't remember who they are, because they were very nice people. And here I talked to riverine people. I really went to visit different communities, and I had only the aim, honestly, to talk about science, but like pack it in mythology. I wanted to know about folklore. I was talking to them about who are the phantoms, who are the agents of nature that you guys have been dealing with. And also indigenous communities. I mean, of course, you look at them and say like, well, they're wearing pants, but they live in this closed communities. Those are they call citatinos, right? Those indigenous people that also live in the city. Of course, I went to see a lot of deforestation and, as mentioned, mining diamonds and gold in Brazil, in this part of the and here's the this water dam that I also had the chance to visit. But I mean, also like, one important thing about my work is that I'm not pointing, as an artist, I don't point out we need energy. We really need energy. It's the way, I like to think about the way we produce energy or the way we distribute energy. For example, just to make it easier here, this water dam doesn't give away not only 1 kilowatt to the community around the water dam. So all the energy produced in this water dam will be exported or go to the south of the country. So this kind of questioning. And then we come to the show. So the show, it's called Environmental Hangover, and I'm actually now I'm not prepared to talk about all the rooms, because I thought it would be like, I just want to talk about 3 specific works from the show, but just quickly said, the show, the Kunsthalle Basel, has this very clear linear narrative when it comes to the architecture. So you have to come in and you go to the end and then you have to come back. So also the show was very much engaged in this way of seeing a show. So the first thing people would see, it was this black ball that was you could not go. You have to go around, because it was like I don't have the word. I'm sorry. Closing the door, the passage, so people would have to go around it, and the show was conceptualized as a body, as an organism. So it was, each room was related to a part of this body. So and the parts of this organism, this body, they were sick. They had disease. And this first room was the skin. There was the skin, and of course, I mean the surface. So here. This sculpture, this ball, is made of styrofoam. So styrofoam is a man-made product that the soil cannot digest. It's like a material that we produce that also is a huge problem because it doesn't disappear. That's what I was like putting on the floor when I was public relations to this place. We had a lot of because also burning styrofoam, it's another problem. We don't have to talk about this, but it's still like important thing for me is like every material I use in the work is because I also wanted to talk about the material of the work. So this is a ball, a shaped ball, a sculpture that is made of styrofoam that I covered with soil, with humus, and then I cover the whole thing with tar, which is like the base. Bitumen is the base a material that we use to construct, to build streets. So it's a complete pavimented ball. You know, so on, and then those reliefs that I do, also to put in light like little points that are important for me, like they are all made of textile, and I never buy new stuff. I collect a lot, and there's like a good anecdote to this, because I have been doing this since I'm a child, and then my mother would always be like, "Don't do it! Don't touch the floor!" And then now I keep on doing it. She's like, "Oh, he's working now. Don't disturb. He's working now." So this is an image of the Atacama Desert, like how cloth pollution is like just changing the whole landscape. Okay, we talk about this. So this is one of the works that I want to talk about, and it's the second room, which was the room of the flash of the organism, and then the flash, the metaphor for here was soil, like how soil, disease of the soil. And then I produced this wall in the middle of the room, dividing the room, which was a pretty clear human construction with kind of an entrance and a room and a place to get out again of this construction. And but it's made of a very old technology called the rammed earth, gestampfte Lehm, which is a technology that have been used since also millennia. Persians, Egyptians, and also Basel and Switzerland. People, there's a lot of house. Also, my house in São Paulo is rammed soil house. And here I work together with architects and a company that are specialized on pushing this technology back to the light, to the spot, because this is also like an alternative to build buildings that are not based on concrete. And I'm just going to do it fast, but I don't have to talk about these problems. I imagine we can do it later. But the idea here is like beton, huh? Or no beton. So this, we don't have to talk about this. This is a room that I like very much. Just going to quickly talk about it. Which is, what was the fourth room? I talk about the limbs, die Glieder of this organism, right? The extensions out of the skin, it was a room made of where it was shown sculptures made of clay of those creatures, animals, and mythological creatures that were like mutilated. They call like a abstract animal, bicho abstrato, and. This room was to celebrate the end of biodiversity, of course, with the animals, but also like the end of cultural diversity. Because like if you turn down, if you finished with an ecosystem, and here of course the metaphor would be like forest, for example, then you also kill the people who lives there. And doing so, you stop the thoughts and the histories that have been told forever. Also, you can bring them to an end. So this room was to celebrate this. And then we have the last room, which was the room of the brain and the heart of this organism, who luckily was still like being happy and or like not happy, but like hope, a lot of hope, and having still like great ideas for possible better realities. This is the moment where you get out of the hangover, basically, like, because the hangover is a state that you know you're gonna get, but you're gonna go. You have to go. I love to do. I know I don't do it anymore. I have kids, so, but you know what is happening. But also, you can get out of this situation that you put yourself on this state. And here on this last room, I just want to talk about these two last works, which is the first one is this flower / satellite, the one on your right, which was also made of rests of debris of textile, but the base behind it is technology that because what happened here is also I came to the ETH and talked to them and I said like, hey, I want to do a sculpture that I can throw on the compost, And then they say like, oh, okay, go to talk to the KIT, which is a Karlsruhe Institute for Technology. It's in Germany, and I went to talk to this Professor Dirk, which is the professor of new sustainable materials. They're doing research to find alternatives to concrete or all the materials we use for civil construction, right? And one of those materials was this, which is a Swiss technology. Can tell you the name later. Not going to make advertising right now. Which is basically this very young people. Because recycling, the problem of recycling is that everything will have one color. We use two-man pigment because it's so beautiful, pink in so many, right? But then what we do, if you mix different all of those components, then we just have beige or gray or brown, right? But what they do, they categorize and divide all this colors of polymers, this Kunststoff, and they find a way to make this plastic, this recycled plastic, be its own raw material. So, what does that mean? They produce boards that if the machine spit those boards out, you make chairs, you make tables, you can even use for civil construction. But then it breaks, then you don't have to go to the scientist again to mix the polymer. You just take the broken one, you melt it down, and you have the same board back again. So it's the way of thinking, the way of seeing potential on trash, like, right? Because we are so good on throwing things away to produce this so we can throw it away, right? That Atacama, there's those images are like, man, all clothes have still labels. So okay, I've been working now with those guys, and I think I made myself clear how they work. And the last one was the core answer to my question: how can I throw a sculpture away? And then the professor introduced me to this very new technology, which have been existing since before us, basically, which is mushroom mycelium. And what is that? Oh, that is actually very easily said are the roots of what we buy on Coop to make Zürich Schnitzel, or how do you call it, right? Mushrooms. And this is a very powerful glue. Coming back to sculpture, like to glue things, we have to develop technologies that consume a lot of oil, a lot of fossil fuel or derivatives to them. So whether you're trying to find a way to glue things without using fossil fuels, and then one of the answers are those mushroom myceliums. So what is this? How does that work? Okay, so basically I produce a form of this, so maybe a detail. This is my interpretation of one legend that I have the fortune to grow up with, the Curupira, which is basically like a figure that protects the woods, okay? And the beautiful superpower is that it has the feet turned backwards, so while he or she walks forward, leave traces to the other side. So the evil people, when they get into the jungle, they got lost. It's basically this. I can explain you later or privately more. But what I did, I produced the form for it, sent to those scientists, and they fill it up with rests of Landwirtschaft, agriculture trash. And then they put the spores of the mushroom inside, and the mushroom grows and spread itself inside of the form. And then at the end, you have a block of a material that has a form, as you can see. But later, you can just throw it away. You just can throw it in your garden, and it's going to be food. Happy bugs, happy microorganisms, happy us, basically. And just to finish, the beauty is like that's the last piece on the show, which talks about also the first piece on the show, because this is a material that they are researching to use it for logistics, because basically we have to keep on ordering. That's also a point, like we cannot say like everybody naked now, so now everybody, no, because we like iPhones, we live like this, we have come that far because we are this, right? So, but these guys are trying, for example, with naked, I mean, let's go back to the basics, right? That's what I meant. And then these guys, they see this as an alternative for styrofoam. So basically, you could like grow your packing material, send it over, and then throw in the garden, and not send to Pindamonhangaba. Thank you very much. I think that's it. Yes. Thank you.